don't know if I really love this decision.
Over the middle, got his man, and look at him go! Jalen Waddle for the touchdown!
Welcome to Inside Leverage, your gateway to the fascinating realm of the Miami Dolphins. Join us as we delve deep into the team's dynamic Super Bowl journey. We invite you to share your most scorching takes, unwind, and relish in our captivating experience.
Blocked by Armstead. Going, he's got him! He's got him! Tyreek Hill! And the Dolphins have come back!
A big play on the first one! Home run! Play one! To the house! What a start for the Dolphins!
It's Inside Leverage. We always gonna put on the show, baby. That's what we do.
Our guest has arrived. Dan, I appreciate you giving us time, man. Could you go ahead and just introduce yourself to the people before we go ahead and get started into the questions? Let them know where they can find your work, what you do, who you are. You got to come off of mute, Dan.
There it is. Hey, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for reaching out. I work for a local ABC station, TV station in Rochester, New York, and we run a Buffalo Plus YouTube channel pretty much covering the Bills extensively. So really appreciate you guys having me on. Safe to say, pretty big week for a Week 4 matchup.
Right. I mean, some people would say that it's a must win on both sides, pretty much.
Yeah, it's
for varying reasons. So for us, because we have a lot to prove, and for you guys to kind of make sure you can stay behind as far as your aspirations of winning the AFC East, it would take your chances would take a good hit with another loss this weekend and within a division and in the conference. So
yeah, massive. It doesn't feel like this game should be a 1:00 Sunday game. I think that's the only thing that sucks about this is that this should be a Sunday night or a Monday night game for sure. But you're totally right. We talked to Josh Allen about it yesterday. They will try and downplay what the possibility of being 0-2 in the division means, but that Jets loss could creep up massively if they're not able to get a win on Sunday against the Dolphins. Falling to 0-2 it's a big hole.
Hey, good. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you taking out the time. I want to ask a question. Like, you just talk about Josh Allen and every athlete, when you talk to them, they're not going to say, yeah, like you said about the 0-2 thing. So I heard something on TV, they bring up a good question. Who has more at stake? And Dan Orlovsky was saying Tua, because he wants to sit at the table with the elites. And the other two were saying that it's Josh Allen because of the last downfall in the playoffs and then the loss to the Jets. Like, if Tua comes and outplays him, that can be a kink in his armor. Do you agree with that? Do you think that he's thinking about stuff like that? Like, we know he's a confident player and all that, but do you think like because I said he might, if we march down the field, that hero he wants to play, Captain Hero, might come out?
Yeah, that's been the mystery with Josh Allen. And he has that Superman, every play is the last play. It's the Super Bowl. It's the fourth quarter. And that's kind of how he plays. And like I said, he talked about it. It's a double-edged sword. We asked him about it after the Jets game where he had the 4 turnovers and he played bad. And I call it a little bit of arm arrogance at times where he thinks he can just put the ball wherever he wants to, whether he thinks he can throw it through a defender or whether he thinks he can run over a defender. And he's done those things at times. Josh has said, like, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes I get away with it and it's the greatest play, and other times I hurt our team. Now, I don't think Josh is ever going to dull one edge of his sword because that's what makes Josh Josh. Brett Favre didn't become a game manager later in his career because he turned the ball over too much. No, it's kind of that's the bed you made with, you made, and that's how you're going to lay in it. As to who has more pressure, it's still early. Josh has played really well the last 2 weeks. I guess I would say Tua just because he still needs to, in my opinion, again, looking from the outside in. And before we get into this, I know this is a Dolphin space. I'm not a Bills fan. I just cover the team. I'm objective here. The fact that Tua hasn't done it as long as what Josh has probably got 2 years of showing that he's an elite quarterback. Tua, when healthy, has shown he can be. But I think if the Bills do lose, you talk about what's more at stake and who's got more on the line. I think it's Tua. Head to head, Josh has been pretty special against the Dolphins in his career. This would be a big game for Tua to win, to come into Buffalo and to be able to get a win at this point in the season. And guys, going back to last year, I was at both games. I was at the incredibly hot game week 3, and then I was at the snow game in week 14 or 15 of last season. And I'll say this. I thought the better team didn't win either game. I honestly thought the Bills were a little bit better in Miami and just couldn't get it done. And obviously the heat was insane. And I thought the Dolphins were the better team for 3.5 quarters in Buffalo. And I thought the Dolphins deserved to win that game. And Josh made a couple plays late. So these two teams, it's a fun rivalry. It's back. But I just think Tua's got to prove that he can maybe win in Buffalo at this stage of his career.
Right. Real quick before I get to on that, but if Josh Allen wins, it's that's what's expected. Mm-hmm. But if Tua outperforms him, then what?
No, I do. Yeah. But my thought is too is that if the Bills offense only scores 12 points or 17 points, then it's on him. But if the Bills lose 38-35, I think you're going to sit there and say, I think Sean McDermott, the pressure is going to be dialed back up on McDermott of, hey, it's pretty easy to beat the Raiders and the Commanders, but what are you going to do against the Chiefs and the Dolphins and the Eagles and these high-powered offenses? Right. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Go ahead, Steve.
Appreciate you giving us your time again, Dan. Go ahead, Steve, and then we're going to go to Finn's Mechanic.
Obviously, as you saying that you're not a Bills fan, and that you're kind of partial in between you know what I mean. We have a unique matchup coming up where when the Miami offense is on the field and the Bills defense is on the field, it's really going to be both head coaches really dueling it out. From what you guys have heard or anything that you've heard, how is the locker room defensively handling the switch from Frazier to McDermott?
They've handled it really well. Look, this locker room, pretty surprised when Leslie Frazier, quote unquote, stepped away. I don't think it was all Leslie's decision. This is just my speculation. None of this has been, it's just the things that I've heard. I think Sean wanted more control. I think Sean is a defensive coach. And I said this before the season. There's not a coach in the NFL, in my opinion, that has more pressure on them than Sean McDermott. Because this goes back.
Preach.
This goes back to 13 seconds. Josh Allen, for all the talk about, I get it. Josh hasn't won an AFC championship. Josh hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Josh played as good as you can play in that 2021 playoff game in Kansas City. And he didn't win. And that sucks, but that's life. And that loss kind of falls on McDermott. So then they go and they play Cincinnati. And again, everything last year, crazy end of the season, obviously with DeMar Hamlin, team kind of ran out of gas. But they didn't show up. And Joe Burrow picked them apart. And again, that's a Sean McDermott defense, right? So, or at the time, I guess you point the finger at Leslie Frazier. And so Sean says, hey, I'm taking the defense back. This is on me. So to me, now he's not on the hot seat. I think people confuse pressure and hot seat. I don't think there's anybody that has more pressure to win and to get to a Super Bowl than Sean McDermott. He's not going to get fired if they don't. But I'm saying is that a lot of the blame before it was, hey, new offensive coordinator. Oh, Leslie Frazier's defense. Well, those aren't excuses anymore. So I think the team's adjusted well. This thought that all of a sudden this is an aggressive defense isn't really accurate. They haven't blitzed anymore. Sean McDermott, even when he was in Carolina, they don't blitz a ton. It's no other. It's just like with Vic Fangio. It works well when you can get there with 4 and drop 7 in coverage. So they played against Sam Howell, who held onto the ball for a really long time. Yes, the coverage was good, but this is going to be a tough test to see what kind of pressure and what kind of scheme McDermott can draw up, because we know Tua gets the ball out of his hands so quickly. How is Sean going to combat the the speed of the Dolphins. He joked yesterday that he wants to bring in Usain Bolt, or he wishes he could bring in Usain Bolt for the scout team this week. Like, these are big tests, and this is going to be Sean's first real challenge as defensive coordinator.
Go ahead, Fence McCann.
Hey guys, hey Dan, what's going on? Sorry I couldn't start off with you guys. I'm glad we sticked on the defense side of it, because I wanted to ask you. I know that you guys are, well, the Bills are more zone, rush for, disguise some things, just be fast and pursuing the ball. Is there a difference in between what McDermott has done so far versus what Frazier has done these past couple years with the Bills?
No, and that's what I think is kind of the misconception, was that, like, Leslie Frazier's this super passive coach, and that Sean McDermott's this, like, crazy guy that dials up all these blitzes. I go back to last year. If Sean McDermott wanted there to be more blitzes under Leslie Frazier, you don't think he tells Leslie, like, hey, we got to send blitzes? Like, you think he just sits there and sits on his hands and goes like, well, Leslie's calling the defense? Like, I think Sean has been very involved in the defense over the years. What has helped this year, guys, is that Greg Rousseau, former Miami Hurricane, has played extremely well through 3 games. Leonard Floyd has been really good. Ed Oliver has played really good. And that, it's a lot easier when you can scheme up all you want, but win your one-on-one battles. How about that? And then everybody looks smarter. So you're not going to see a bunch of changes, and it'll be interesting to see. Sean likes to disguise things. It's nice when they have their veteran all-pro safeties back, which they didn't last year, and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. But with all of the Dolphins' pre-snap motion, how much can you disguise? And we asked Sean about it yesterday. How much can you disguise without putting yourself out of position? Because to some respects, you can try and disguise it as late as you want, but if you're going up against this kind of speed with Waddle and Tyreek, like, you might put yourself out of position on top of trying to be, outsmarting the, Tua. So that's what you're going to see. But it's really a very similar defense through 3 weeks that we saw for the last 5 years under Leslie Frazier.
Hey Dan, really quick on that topic, right? I was listening to the Cover One podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, like a Bills base, and they were talking about the similarities in the fact that, like, you guys are kind of like you show something pre-snap and then post-snap the look changes, and it's kind of the same with our defense too, right? But as far as our offense, that's kind of what we've been doing with a lot of the last second speed motions and speed outs and things like that to create some disadvantages right before the snap. And I just wanted to know if you think that could pose a big issue for the Bills based on what you know from what you asked of Sean McDermott and all that. Do you see them being able to slow down this offense on Sunday?
I don't know. That's a great question, because I mean, again, I've watched what you guys saw in the 70 points and in the pre-snap motion. I love it just as much as you guys. I've been screaming for Ken Dorsey to do it for the last season and a quarter, is this pre-snap motion, because I think it was the Denver game last year that they were able to jam you guys at the line, and that kind of threw off the rhythm and all of those things.
The Chargers
game. Thank you. It was that game. And that kind of, people were like, oh, here's the blueprint of how you do it. It's easier said than done, especially when I have so much respect for Mike McDaniel. I love his authenticity. I love the way that he approaches the game. And just looking at that, all of a sudden it's the pre-snap motion, but you can't jam a guy if he's moving sideways or if he's got a running start. Like, and I was talking to somebody else. I go, people, it's like, oh, just jam him at the line. Okay, then if you miss, he's by you. Like, it's not that simple. And it's not that simple of, okay, so I don't want him to run by me, so I have to give him an 8-yard cushion. Well, then you can't put your hands on him. So I'm looking at this game going, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Now, Taron Johnson, the Bills slot corner, we talked to him yesterday. He says you have to be physical to slow down the speed. I just don't know how you get to be physical when, like we've said, this is mainly a zone defensive team. So how are you going to disguise those two things? I think it's going to cause a lot of problems, just because the Bills' corners aren't extremely fast to begin with. And for as good as Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are at keeping things in front of them, I just think this is a tough test. And we saw it even in Miami last year when they hit Waddle for a deep one. There are holes in this defense that I think will be challenged.
So, Dan, once again, I want to thank you for coming through. Everyone, go ahead and support Dan. Give him a follow, man. If you
Appreciate it.
need any updates throughout the week, he'll be able to provide some of that for you guys. I appreciate you guys for coming through. Dan, I know you said you have another podcast that you have in a few minutes or whatever. Do you have time for a few more questions
Yeah,
with us?
absolutely.
Okay, cool. Let's go Dundee and then French.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dan. Thanks very much for your time and your experience. Much appreciated. I have two questions. You mentioned about the comparison between Brett Favre and later in his career and how he kind of matured and suggested perhaps that Josh Allen might have a bit of that in him. Is there something you've seen that makes you think that, or is it just a hope because he gets older? And the other question is, how much do you think that Stephon Diggs has been trading on reputation the last season and a half? And how much of a problem is that going to be for you?
Yeah, thanks for the question. First one is, I don't think – I was joking around about the Favre comparison because Favre did not change. And I don't see Josh Allen changing. I guess that's my point, is people want to compare or say like – they want to say like Allen's like Rodgers. Like Rodgers was so smart with the football. Josh has the most turnovers in the NFL since he arrived in the league. Like – and I don't think he's all of a sudden going to turn into Alex Smith at some point in his career. Because when you do that, you take away what makes him so special. It's those plays where, as Bills fans, they all tell us it's no, 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 yes. Wow, what a throw, Josh. Like, that's what he does. And he's done it. He did it in the Jets game. He did it against the Raiders. Like, yeah, there are bad plays that go along with it. And so Brett Favre threw interceptions until the day that he was knocked out of the league. And I just think that that's what it's going to be. And real quick stories. I remember during the pandemic, I caught up with Josh Allen's Wyoming coach, Greg Bohl, who was still at Wyoming. And I asked him for his best Josh Allen story. And he said it was one day during a fall practice, and it was a play it was play action, and the play was designed. The first read was to go to the fullback in the flat. And instead, Josh rolled out, he said, off one leg, threw it 65 yards on a seam for a touchdown right down the middle to the wide receiver. And everybody went, wow. And the coach pulled Josh aside and he goes, hey, Josh, great throw. But like the play is designed to go to the fullback. And he said, Josh looked at him, smiled and said, no, coach, Brett Favre says touchdowns first. Like that is who Josh Allen is. He through and through. He looks for the big plays first. It is so hard for him to like take what the defense gives him. He can do it, but it's not what he likes to do. So that's where I think Josh will always be this way till the end of his career. It's what makes him great. It's what also makes him very frustrating, and where people will always be able to say, yeah, he's good, but he turns the ball over. And as for Stephon Diggs, he's been incredible this season. He really has. I know there's been a lot of offseason drama. When he has spoken to the media, it's been rare, but when he's spoken, it is so well said. He's once again a captain. He talks about how he only takes things personal from people he knows personally, so he doesn't care about all this outside noise. I don't think there's any truth to him wanting to leave, going somewhere else. I think he's frustrated that they haven't won and had this Super Bowl window where they're at. But I can tell you this, from being on the sidelines, being at practice, like Stephon Diggs is what really drives this team forward. And when he was playing bad against the Jets, he's the one in Josh's ear saying, you're good. He's the one saying, hey, look my way. Trust me, I'll win my matchup. And like, I know you're not supposed to force the ball to any wide receiver. With this Bills offense, it is totally okay to force the ball towards Stephon Diggs.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Dan. Go ahead, Brando, and then French.
French was first.
French was first. My bad.
Hey, Dan. Thank you for your time. Just kind of listening to what you're saying. Some of it's making sense, but some of it to me is not making sense. Kind of along the lines of Josh Allen's best attributes are just kind of doing his own thing, kind of like almost like Matt Moore, risk it, no biscuit kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If this game gets out of control, I mean, in like a good old fashioned blowout, a 40-17 kind of game, a 35-10, a 20-40 kind of game. Mm-hmm. Do you think the downfall falls more on McDermott or it falls on Josh Allen?
I think it falls 40-20 is a tough task, because I think the Bills will need. I think the winning team's got to score 35. So I think Josh is going to have to have some of those outstanding plays. Look, Ken Dorsey is not the type of play caller that I wish he could be. I love Brian Daboll. I joke around that I love him more than certain members of my family. He drew things up that got guys open. Ken Dorsey hasn't shown that ability yet. So at times, the Bills' identity on offense has been third and, hey, Josh, save us. Do something crazy. Do something spectacular. And they've gotten burned by it. Like the Dolphins have a running game. The Dolphins have things they can depend on and trusted plays and trusted schemes and fits where they go, this is what we know we can do and we can get. The Bills haven't shown that the last year in 3 games. So Josh he's been saying, I need to be smarter with the ball. The problem is that it's really tough to have consistently 15 play drives without a holding, without a full start. So at times it's been Josh has to do everything. And that also causes problems. So that's where I say, like, it's his biggest strength is that he can carry a team. The problem is that when he tries to carry a team, sometimes it backfires and bad things happen. So who does the pressure fall more on? It's a good question. I don't think that – I think Sean McDermott would like to keep this game not to be a shootout as a defensive head coach. But I think that he's going to have to understand that both offenses are going to get their points. So, I think there is a lot of pressure on on Josh as well to put up 35 points in this game.
Thanks again, Dan. Dan has to get up out of here, guys. So we're gonna clear the hands that are up, and then that'll be it for the questions, so we can let him get ready for his next podcast. So go ahead, Brando, and then I have some fan questions, and then we can wrap it up with Big Ern's question. Is that cool, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
All right. Yep.
I was wondering if your safeties are healthy. I know they were both. I was wondering if it was just vet rest or
they should be
just more of vet rest.
Yeah, it should be both healthy. Hyde's groin or hamstring was the same thing he had last week. He was fine, ended up playing. Poyer's a knee that flared up in the game, but he's kind of been dealing with that throughout the season. So a lot of veteran rest, at least on Wednesday. I expect them both to be full go by Friday.
Okay, and then on top of that, do you think that would be a problem mid-game since they're going to be dealing with Tyreek speed, Jalen Waddle speed, Raheem Mostert?
Yeah.
I was wondering if injuries will have a problem, and how do you think your rookie linebacker is going to hold up in this game?
Yeah, I think they should be okay. Obviously, it's a concern. They haven't dressed more than 4 safeties. They also have Taylor Rapp, who was pretty good for the Rams for a few years. So they always have him as like a strong safety / smaller linebacker to fit in there as well. And then as for Terrell Bernard, he's coming off the AFC Defensive Player of the Year. He is the complete opposite of what Tremaine Edmonds was for this team. Tremaine, 6'5", freak of nature. Terrell, much smaller. He looks like a safety, but he has just been similar to a Matt Milano type. Not as good as Matt Milano, who's an all-pro, but the sense of smaller linebackers that can cover as well as tackle and make plays and kind of fly around the field. So far through 3 games, it's been a big success. And again, the Bills always understand. I think they are always looking at the Chiefs. They're looking at the Dolphins. They're looking at offensively where the league's going. It's not getting any slower. So to go from a bigger linebacker like Tremaine was to a smaller, more agile linebacker like Terrell is, it's paid off well so far. On Sunday will be the test.
So some questions from the audience really quick, Dan, for you. Somebody asked your thoughts on the injuries on the O-line and your overall thoughts on the O-line going into this matchup, if those injuries will be impactful in your opinion or not. And they also asked if you were Vic Fangio, what would you do to slow down Josh Allen?
So you're talking about the Bills' offensive line?
Correct, the Bills' offensive line. Sorry, I should have specified.
They were phenomenal against the Commanders, which I thought was going to be their best front that they had faced defensive line-wise with Chase and Allen and all those guys. They probably played their best game. The only one that is injured, as far as I know, anything serious, is Ryan Bates, who's like their swing guard, swing tackle, center guy. So, I don't think that should be an issue health-wise for the offensive line. As for Vic Fangio, it'd be interesting to see because it's a lot of the same players that Miami obviously has had. But when Vic was at Denver, Josh tore him up in the COVID year in 2020. So it'll be interesting to see how he pairs that because obviously he's got much better athletes on this side of the ball. And we all know how much fun the Christian Wilkins, Josh Allen rivalry is. That's the one thing I'm working on today. I asked Josh about that. But if I was Vic, I would pressure Josh. I would test this offensive line once again. They held up well against just Max Crosby against the Raiders. They did not hold up so well against the Jets. They held up well against the Commanders. It's still a cause for concern for me, if I'm being honest, is the offensive line.
Last one, Dan. Is this the best era in Bills football right now?
Yeah, by far. Not only just because of Josh, but because of the way the defense has played over the last Sean McDermott era, with all pros of, they drafted well with Trey White, Matt Milano, the safeties they signed, things like that. This is again, my first year covering the team was Rex Ryan's last year, and I always say the biggest difference is they have an adult in the room now. Rex Ryan was just a joke of organizationally and things like that. Players were really kind of doing their own thing. It's been really fun to see Sean McDermott be an adult in the room, but this will be one of his biggest tests so far, especially in the regular season.
So would you say Josh Allen's better than Jim Kelly?
Whew. Why'd you mute? Why'd you
sorry.
mute?
Sorry, I did that by accident. I was trying to mute myself. Like he just started covering. So he can't. I don't know if he can do that. Like
let him
you can't put him on the spot like that.
Let him
go.
I think what Josh is able to bring to the game is revolutionary in the sense of him running and passing. He's not the thrower that obviously Jim was, but being the heart and soul of this team, especially for a few years before Steph got here, like these were some crappy offenses that he limped around with. So athletically, I'll say yes, but obviously we know that championships will define any quarterback's legacy with a franchise.
So, do you have time for one more, Dan?
I got to duck out of here, guys. I'm sorry.
Before you go, can you just give us a game prediction?
Dolphins 31-30.
Woo! About one.
Yeah.
All right, nice.
Have fun, guys. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, Dan, have a good one.
I
Appreciate you.
Thanks for coming.